It is coming up now on 8:37, Acadiana's Morning News. And as promised, Scott Angelle joining us on the line. He is one of the four major candidates for governor, and tomorrow is the big day, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. It's absolutely a delight to be joining you this morning and to be talking to voters in Acadiana this morning.
All right, so I am curious to know, has one of the ladies we had in this morning, one of the candidates for one of our local offices, she described this candidate experience as kind of an up and down thing this kind of go round. Would you kind of agree with that, disagree with it, and what's it really been like out on the campaign trail, Mr. Angelle?
Well, it's been fabulous to me. I absolutely get all of my personal energy from being around people, and, obviously campaigns are about being around people. So for me, it's been a delight for the last 12 months to be a warrior, to be a happy warrior, and to crisscross Louisiana and to bring a message of bipartisan leadership, to bring a message that we don't need a governor that claims to know everything as much as we need a governor who is willing to work with everyone. And our campaign has resonated. We've been at it. We continue to be at it. We'll be on the road today. I'm going to work to the last minute of the last day. So it has been, for me, a very positive, rewarding experience.
All right. I'm kind of curious, too, from the standpoint of talking about issues. I don't think people, everyday people, they don't follow it as much as we do, I don't think. They know, the state's got a problem because we almost shut down higher education. So they know there's a problem with money. But I don't know how closely people pay attention to it. But, boy, they need to pay attention to it because we have some major problems, not only this fiscal year, but the fiscal year beyond that. So we're really asking folks for specifics. So what do you think you could really do specifically, sir, to be able to get us on the right path?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand is what this election is about. This election is not about a hurricane, and it's not about an oil spill. This election, Bernadette, for me, and I think for Louisiana, is about whether or not we have the courage and the leadership to finally get our fiscal house in order. And when we take a look at two very important metrics to measure the economy, that is the number of people working and the productivity of those people. Last year, we pegged the needle in both of those silos. We had the highest non-farm employment we ever had, produced the highest gross domestic product we ever had, yet we had a $1.6 billion shortfall. There is a structural problem in the way the economy performs in this state and the way our budget operates. So this entire election is about whether or not we have the courage and leadership to fix that. I've made it very clear. That's why I got into this race. I believe if we don't fix this, we'll be back here in 4 years with another set of candidates talking about the same thing. There's three things we need to do. Obviously, in a $25 billion budget, there will always be ways to cut and streamline. I refuse to believe that we cut government as much as we can. So that's number one. Number two, over the last 50 years, we have chosen to statutorily divert about $2 billion away from the general fund to other things. And in our general fund in Louisiana, we use it to pay for three primary things: medication, education, and public safety. Three very, very important things. And we've chosen to divert money away from that to less important things. We got to have a hard discussion about which one of those things we got to return money to those three core things. Finally, when it comes to tax credits and tax rebates, this state has got drunk on giving away your money. The most sacred thing that government has the power to do is to take away your money through taxes. The next most sacred thing they have to do is when they give it away to somebody else. In our state, we have given away $7.5 billion a year in the forms of tax credits and tax rebates. We have no process to follow them. We have no process to rank them. I've said time and time again, tax credits ought to not be emotional. They ought not be something we fall in love with. They ought to be something that gives us a return on our investment, and yet we have no process to even measure that return on investment. If we will focus on those three things in the first year, I'm absolutely certain we can get our fiscal house in order. Once we get our fiscal house in order, we can then use that to help develop a plan for health care and higher education and transportation.
We're speaking with Scott Angelle, candidate for Louisiana governor. And, Mr. Angelle, I wanted to ask you, we had a candidate earlier that joined us who's running for state senate, and one of his big priorities was out-of-state contracts. And he talked about how he believes that out-of-state contracts are basically like a slap in the face to people here in Louisiana, and it's telling them that they're not good enough. Do you agree with that sentiment, and do you believe that that something needs to be done about out-of-state contracts?
Well, look, I believe that in every instance we ought to give every person in Louisiana the advantage of doing business with the state versus out-of-state contractors. No doubt about that, okay? However, I think the bid laws are very clear, is that when we put together the kind of information and we send it out into the marketplace, Louisiana is looking for as much competition as possible. We ought to favor our in-state. We ought to look at perhaps an amount, perhaps if it's 4 to 6 or 8% that we'd be willing to award contracts for that are for in-state contractors versus out-of-state, no question about it. But, those are all some of the things that I think are part of the fiscal reform that we look at and make certain that when we create jobs for our people and not for people from out of state.
All right, Scott Angelle joining us in studio, of course, one of the 4 major candidates for governor. Of course, everybody heads to the polls tomorrow. Those polls open at 7 a.m. They won't close until 8 p.m. All right, one of the questions we have for our gubernatorial candidates is, what differentiates you? What makes you different from the other 3 candidates in this race? So what do you think makes you different?
Well, the first thing I would say is of the top 4 candidates, I'm the only one that's not a lawyer. That in of itself ought to be enough to get folks looking my way, right?
Okay.
And moving past that, and I certainly do have a business background, so I bring business principles to the governor's office. But more than that, more than anything, what I would tell you is that I get my energy from people and not from policy. I believe being governor sits at the intersection of policy and people, and I believe that we need a governor who understands people. Let me say that I come from the bottom. I'm a bottom-up candidate. I am the most bottom-up candidate in this race. I started at the very bottom in the local level where your service mattered to what happened in your zip code, where you ran into people in the grocery store and in the church that you served, and you didn't have the ability to point to somebody else or a staffer. That has shaped me, and I would just say, Bernadette, for you, yourself, or folks who are out there who started at the very bottom of anything and kind of climbed and scratched and clawed to try to get to the top of their profession, I think people understand that when you come from that place, you arrive at a spot. When you do so, you approach problem solving differently. You include people. You didn't know it all coming up. You didn't know it all when you got there. And I just think it drives cooperation and collaboration and negotiation, and I think it's inclusive. And I think this state is starving. At this point, I think this state is starving for someone who on the very first day can reach across the lines that have particularly divided us and say, you know what? Just because you got elected, just because yesterday you were a candidate and today you elected, you don't go from knowing something to knowing everything. And I will be the candidate in this race that continues to pull people together, because I don't believe Louisiana can be all we can be by continuing to send elected officials in their own red corner or their own blue corner and pointing fingers across the ring at each other. And when they point fingers, they point the fingers across the very people that matter, the people of Louisiana.
Coming up now on 846, we shall continue our discussion with Scott Angelle on the way, coming up in just a few minutes. And then we'll be closer to the end of the segment as well. Sir, just stand by, and we'll be back with you coming up in just a bit. It's Acadiana's Morning News. It is coming up now on 8:52, Acadiana's Morning News. We continue our conversation. Just a few more minutes left with Scott Angelle. He's, of course, one of the 4 major candidates for governor in Louisiana. As we're wrapping up here this morning, we do want to talk with you a little bit about, higher education and some of the other problems that we have with our roads situation. As governor, if you're elected governor, do you really think you can substantially, sooner rather than later, do something with the state of our traffic situation and the quality and condition of our roads and bridges?
Absolutely. I'm the only person in this race that's ever built a road as a former parish president. I get it. The first thing we've got to do, Bernadette, is we've got to return confidence to the voters of Louisiana. Folks pay gasoline taxes. They were told that if they paid gasoline taxes, those taxes would go to build roads. Mm-hmm. And we in the legislature has diverted much of the money away to pay for non-infrastructure related items. That's unfair. We've got to clean up that house, and we got to make certain that people understand in Louisiana that when they give us a penny, we use it for the intended purposes. And so that's the first thing we can do. I'm going to clean up that language and make it very, very clear that the money that goes in a transportation trust fund can only be used for transportation trust fund projects. I did it in local government. I can do it in state government. It's the same rules that apply. It's just a little bit bigger stage. That's the first thing we'll do. We'll put the trust back into the transportation trust program. The second thing we'll do is we have a capital outlay budget every year. Rather than using the capital outlay budget to make friends, I'll use a capital outlay project to build roads and to do the kind of things that build an economy. I've said early and often that when we build roads, we do more than building a place to go from point A to point B. We build an entire economy. And, Bernadette, what's sad to me, it's the most bipartisan issue in all of America because there's no exit for the Republicans and no exit just for Democrats or independents. The potholes are the same. The businessman or businesswoman who is stuck in traffic trying to get across town to close the deal is stuck in the same traffic as the single mom with two babies in the rear car seat. So it's one of those issues that I have found as a local leader that when you're honest with folks and you tell them what happens, they're willing to support some of the change that we need. The third thing we'll do, I'm going to move to decentralized DOTD. I think we got to break the state up into much more of a decentralized way. I do not believe that Louisiana can wait on Washington to fix us when it comes to traffic. And I likewise do not believe that the 64 parishes and the 303 municipalities can wait on state government to bring the kind of solutions that I would bring in more of a decentralized regional way. Look, if Lafayette wants to do something and another region of the state doesn't want it, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. So I'll be looking at a much more decentralized model.
Okay. All right. We only have about a minute left. Anything you want to do to wrap up? We like, leave the last minute for the candidate. Anything you want to sum up saying?
Well, look, I would certainly say to the folks of Acadiana, I've had the opportunity to represent the folks of Acadiana. Folks in Acadiana know that I have a heart of a warrior, that when, it was our backs were against the wall in 2010 with one stroke of the pen, the White House tried to shut down the drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. It was I who brought that courage and that leadership. I'm the only person in this race who's actually took on President Obama and won. There's a lot of them that talk about doing it, but there's only one of us that actually took him on and won. And I got that drilling moratorium lifted for the people of Louisiana. I made it very clear that it wasn't about the shareholders of Exxon or Chevron. It was about the Cheremies and the Calais and the Dupuis and the Robins and all the folks across Louisiana. I'll continue to bring that same battle, that same warrior mentality every day to work for the people of Louisiana. My wife and I, with our 5 kids, asked the people of Louisiana and certainly the people of Acadiana who are listening this morning, if you undecided, I'm asking you to consider me. The last name is Angelle. It has 2 L's, and it stands for Loves Louisiana. Pour moi, c'est la Louisiane. Chaque fois, tous les temps. For me, it's Louisiana every time and all the time.
Scott Angelle has been our guest, sir. Thank you very much for your time this morning. We certainly do appreciate it.
Thank you much.
Have
a good day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You too. All right, coming up now on 8:57. Well, you have heard from just about as many people as we could get into the show.
Yes.
So there's your folks. Hopefully you'll be able to catch it on the rerun on the website. We'll be working to get all of those up today as well. So only 45% to maybe 50% of us will go out and vote tomorrow. Some of you may be disgusted and you don't want to go out and vote. Maybe you don't like nobody or whatever for any race, a local race or whatever. You really ought to think about that. Take a look at all the candidates. Take a real good look. You got lots of interviews at kpel965.com. Take a real good look and think about what works best for you and your family. And then, tomorrow night we'll be here at 8 o'clock. We'll have some fun. We'll talk, me and Dr. John Sutherland. I've been waiting years to do a show with the man. I finally get it to happen, and it's on a Saturday night. So somebody better tune in and listen. I'll be lonely if you don't. Warren Cottle will give his commentary. Mike Stagg will give some commentary. We're going to have Moon Griffon doing a little commentary. And we'll have folks all over Acadiana out there. They're going to be talking a little bit about, hey, what does this candidate think now that these numbers are coming in? And we're obviously going to get some victors tomorrow evening, so we'll talk to those folks as well. So, it's your civic duty to go out there and vote, so make sure you understand the issues. Don't forget, there are 4 constitutional amendments on that there ballot. So you got to read on those a little bit and know what you're doing, too. You can't just go in there and vote no on all of them. You got to go in there and say, oh, I'm voting no because, or I'm voting yes because. And I don't know. Brandon said there's a new rule that if you don't vote, you can't call the show anymore. No.
Well, it does take away some of your right to complain. You have a chance to let your voice be heard at the ballot box.
That's
Go
right.
do it.
That's right. So I don't know what the other 55% are doing tomorrow, but shame on you. It's only a 40% chance of shower. Get an umbrella. All right, coming up now on 8:59, we got a little something you should know coming up.